Yeah, is everyone ready to go?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you?
Roll,
All right,
rolling.
we are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. And by the way, Caitlin, remember to check for Mr. Carnwath and the panelists when you can see the attendees.
Yep, we'll do.
Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday night, 27th of August, 2020 virtual Zoom meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission. This is your Chairman, Glenn Richards, speaking. We'll go around the horn here to verify our panelists or commissioners. I'll just take them in the order they're showing up on my screen. I've got Patricia Pecknick, the Vice Chair.
Here.
You're here, right? Mr. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Yep. Mr. Patrick McNamee.
Mr. Peter McNamee?
I'm sorry. What did I say? Patrick, I'm sorry. Peter. Thank you, Peter. Christopher Fay.
Here.
Are you here? Great. And Caitlin, well, Caitlin's moderating. Andy Port may be joining us later. He's in a meeting with the mayor and others, and he'll be joining us as soon as he can. And we also have Gretchen Joy, note taker. And is there any sign of Malcolm on the participants list? Let's take a look here. Attendees.
Does not look like it yet.
Steve Dodge, Stephanie. Okay, well, we'll see if he joins. Meanwhile, we have only a relatively light agenda. The main item is 21-23 Walnut Street. That's Jeff and Nora Dodge residents. They're represented by Lisa Mead, who I have misspelled on my notes here. Let me correct that. But Mead, Tolman, and Costa. I think I saw them in the attendees list. I see Ms. Mead. And let's see, I see Chris Dodge. Is that right? Christopher Dodge? Oh, and there's Jeff Dodge. Okay, so so good. So they're here, and I see Lisa is queuing up her her presentation. So we'll get to that in just a moment, and we'll have you speaking, Ms. Mead. I just want to get everyone on the commission on the same page, because we've had quite a few demo delay hearings, not as many ZBA special permit hearings, or so I just want to make sure everyone on the commission, especially our newer commissioners, are on the same page as to what the process is. That is, there's a residence that we're going to be considering, this Walnut Street residence, that is in the COD zone, and the amount of demolition exceeds 25%. So the ordinance requires the applicant to get a special permit from the special permit granting authority. In this case is the Zoning Board of Appeals. The role of the Newburyport Historical Commission is to provide I've heard it called an advisory report or historical report, which we hand over to the ZBA for them to take into consideration. It's supposed to report on things such as the quote, the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demolition, and the relative importance of such historic building or structure in the context of the block where such building or structure is located. And then before acting on their permit application, the ZBA should consider both our report and the conditions report and any other reports that are relevant and submitted. And I know that, we'll let Ms. Mead, we'll let you talk about the engineering report, which we've had a chance to look at, and we have a couple of questions about that and other things. So anyway, that's what we're about tonight. Our responsibility is to provide this report to the ZBA, and I know a number of us have some questions and things. I think what we usually do, though, however, is allow the applicant, or I assume it'll be the attorney for the applicant, make a little presentation. So have we enabled, is Ms. Mead able to, it looks like, let's see, I see Ms. Graff has got permitted, and Jeff Dodge, and oh yeah, Ms. Mead can. So the chair recognizes Ms. Mead. Are you going to be doing the presentation?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa Mead, Teller & Costa, on behalf of the applicants, Jeff and Nora Dodge. And I will be doing part of the presentation, and Eileen Graff will be doing a part of the presentation. She's the architect on the project. Steve Dodge, who is the brother of Jeff Dodge, who's a local contractor, many of you know, is also on the call in case there are some questions relative to the construction. And I appreciate the chair's opening because I actually, because we haven't been in for just an advisory determination in a while, I was going to review almost exactly what the chair has reviewed relative to what the DCOD zoning ordinance requires or requests of the commission. As the chair also knows, typically the commission does look for the opinion of the commission with respect to the conditions report too. They like to hear back from the commission on that. But I think it's also one thing that's important, I think, to remind the commissioners about is the difference between the DCOD provisions and the DOD provisions. And there actually, there's a significant difference. And I just want to quote one thing from the DCOD, because this is the one of the big differences, and that is that the ordinance provides, and I quote, "This section is not intended to regulate the mere alteration of an historic building or structure, even if such alteration involves A, the demolition of a character-defining exterior architectural feature and or a single external wall," which of course is not applicable here. So I think that that's important because, as you know, in the DOD, those things, particularly specific architectural features, exterior architectural features, can be regulated by the DOD, but not necessarily by the DCOD. So with that, since the chair already covered those other parts, I'll move into our presentation. This project is the house is at 21 to 23 Walnut Street. It is currently a two-family house and was converted to such. It's unclear when. However, the Dodgers wish to change it back to a one-family, which is what its original intent and use was. The portion of the structure which is being removed, and I'm going to go over the details of the history of the structure in a little bit. So right now we're going to go through the part that we want to remove, and then I'll talk about the house itself. The portion of the structure we want to remove is at the rear of the structure, and is provided by Mr. Fix's report, is in very poor condition and retains, in our opinion, his opinion, no substantial remaining market value or reasonable use, and the amount of rehabilitation required to harmonize it with the original structure is not reasonably feasible. In fact, Mr. Fix says specifically, he quotes, "It's unsafe, it's unstable, and not capable of resisting expected loads." And that's important. And what I just showed to the commission, if you could go, Caitlin, to the next slide. These are some slides of the conditions. You have the top slide is the rot of the siding and sheeting at the base of the rear wall due to the grade being too high. And the next, the photo down below that is the interior view, the rot and deterioration of the rear wall. I'm glad it's Mr. Fix crawling under these houses and not me.
Yeah, quick question on that, Ms. Mia. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was wondering, it wasn't quite clear, and these photos are a great example to show. This rear addition, is it just this crawl space under it, no cellar, and is that also true of the main house, or is there a cellar under the main house?
Go ahead, Eileen.
I was going to say yes. So you're looking directly under this addition space. It's only crawl, if you call it crawl. It's very tight in some areas, right. And then a little deeper in others. But you know, it's marginal in its access, etc.
But and there is a cellar. There is a cellar under the main house.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. So this, in fact, this was a good point, Mr. Chair. So this is a photo of the crawl space. The wood column is set on an unstable stone, as you can see at the top. And the second photo is the wood column is set more on wood and brick footings. And then the next slide is a slide of the second floor framing. The beams are cut off, resulting in an unsafe condition. And then the second photo in there are the collar ties are too high, which induces too much stress in the rafters, and the rafters seat cuts at the wall plate are too severe, resulting in an overstress in shear. What's important is that this rear addition actually is obviously, when we go through these next photos, you can see later added. Now, later, of course, is a relative term in a house that was built in 1850. The addition, as we're going to show on the Sanborn maps, or some form thereof, does show up in the early 1900s. But I think that when you can see how it's attached to the house, not only because of this crawl space evidence, but because of how it's actually attached, you'll see that it was later added. So if you go to the next slide, this is the house itself. This is looking down the driveway. The house is on the right. And you go to the next slide. This is a photo. The top is in the backyard, looking back at the addition. So you can see the addition with the stairs going up to it. And then the bottom photo is a photo of the side of the house if you were going down Walnut Street to the north. And then the next.
That's the side opposite the driveway. Yeah.
Correct. That's correct. And then this is the one I think that really shows that that was later added. I think if you look at the placement of that roof against the window on the original house, it gives you an idea of how that this addition actually was put on. So this is a closer up view of the addition and porch that was later added. Both of these photographs provide those views. And then the next slide, this is just a closer up picture of the addition that we're requesting to be taken off. And this is the only thing that's being taken off the house is the addition, but because of its size and it's 2 stories, that's how it gets up to the 36%. So this is a little further view away from that side opposite the driveway. And then the next slide shows pictures of the front of the house, the top, and then the second photo underneath is the side of the house where the driveway is. And the next slide, please, Caitlin. That's another view of the front of the house. As you know, we give you so many photos because we want the record to be clear. That is part of the DCOD, is to make sure there's a clear record of the structure in the City Hall files. So again,
I'm sorry, it looked like there was one, were all these taken in around the same time? Because the one, that frontal view you showed us a page or 2 back, showed some, yeah, that one, some foliage and things. It looked like it's in better shape. So is that a little bit older picture, Ms. Mead, or what?
I don't know. I think it may be the angles too. It may be a little bit older. I did not take that particular photograph.
Yeah.
If I could speak to it, it's just earlier in the summer,
Okay.
when things were a little more green.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the next photograph. So these are more photos of the setting. I can speak to these. I actually took these photos. So this idea of these photos were to give the commission in the file photos of the setting where the house exists. So there's one view of it. The next is from that non-driveway side again. Looking back, you'll see that there's a lot of foliage around the house. Big tree right in the front of the house. Again, you see the side there. And there's a front looking down towards the non-driveway side. And then a shot from the sidewalk from the house next door. So if you can go to the next slide, Caitlin, please. So as I noted earlier, the structure's constructed in around 1850, according to the data sheets, and according to our title search as well. There is no Form B available. The earliest Sanborn map, and if you could, actually, I think it's on the next page. Yes, if you can go to the next page, the earliest Sanborn map, I don't know if you can blow that up or not, Caitlin, but shows the structure in 1900. The problem with the Sanborn maps before this is they don't go down this far to the end of town. So there are earlier Sanborn maps, as you know, but the ones that I saw did not go this far down the end of town. So you see some form of an addition on the back here in 1900, 1906. If you go to the next slide, and that same form exists on the next Sanborn map, which is 1914. And if you could go to the next slide. Caitlin.
Looks like the placement of the outbuilding changed at some point.
Yeah, the outbuilding has moved around in the backyard. So the 1900, 1906, and 1914 Sanborn maps certainly all show some form of an addition in the back. This, of course, is the assessor's map. So all of this does suggest that that rear addition was later added. And again, I say that with relatively speaking. So the applicant, we have a proposed addition, and if you could go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So the proposed addition, and I don't know if you can blow that up. This is kind of small on my screen, so I'm not sure what it looks like on everybody else's screen. This is the site plan. Eileen will go over the architectural plans in a moment. Will remain lower in height than the existing structure and will continue to use siding material which is in harmony with the original structure and include 2/2 windows, also appropriate for the age of the structure. While the addition is longer than the portion being removed, it's on the same wall plane. It maintains a one-story aspect of the southeastern side and has the same width on the second floor. As a result of reviewing how to restore, repair, and reconfigure the structure in a way that is not too large for the existing structure, the applicants are determined they need to construct living space in the attic. And so Eileen's going to review for you a change in the roof line on the right-hand side of the structure from the front by a small, low-profile dormer to allow stairs up to the roof. And so you can see in this plan in the dark lines, the proposed addition for the back, and you can see in the hash lines underneath that addition that's being taken off up to the wall of the existing original historic house. And so if you go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, and she will go over with you the existing conditions and proposed renovations.
Great, thank you very much. Eileen Graff Architects. As Attorney Mead mentioned, the original Greek Revival structure was built in 1850. Its footprint is a pretty clean 22-foot by 32-foot footprint. The addition on the back, as you can see in the bottom drawing towards the left, that addition on the rear is 16 feet wide by approximately 24 deep, with the covered porch towards the driveway side. As you could see in this drawing, the addition is simpler in its details, minimal overhangs, lower ceiling heights, lower eaves, and clearly a lower ridge than the original structure. So the design goals for this project was to convert the structure from its chopped up current two-family state to bring it back to a single family in a cohesive manner. Ultimately, what happened was a lot of spatial demands were bringing the primary living spaces towards the rear on the first floor due to simply wanting to be connected to the backyard, which is the private and happens to be the southern exposure. Likewise, on the second floor, it has the same demands, where there was the desire to put the master suite on the more private end of the house and better exposure. So with all this effort and in pushing these sort of important living spaces to the back part of the house, we came to the place where we're assessing the structural integrity of the existing building. You know, its framing is marginal in its integrity, as well as the foundation. it's rather unknown as far as how deep it can go. It exists. So therefore, investing the kind of money it would take to bring this up, to provide these spaces that were needed on the first and second floor, was really a big question as to if it was worth it. And so that's why we're in front of you today. We would like to rebuild it, and very much in the same concept as what exists now. So the new proposed is similar in proportion. It's 16 feet wide. But extends a little longer at 34 feet long. The new addition will take on a taller wall height, and that's due to a couple reasons. We have to provide floor framing now that will meet the spans code for the spans that are there today, the 16 foot, as well as trying to align the second floor to the existing front second floor, as the current condition is you step down 2 steps when you go from the original house to the existing addition. So we'd like to align that so that it's fluid in its flow from front to back. So the intent is to raise it up just a foot, just to gain some of that head height back, and at the same time still maintaining the lower profile from the original house. So respecting the sort of hierarchy of the original house to the secondary back addition. Towards the driveway, you can see the 1-story space. It will have a similar shed roof as to the covered porch that exists today. And then likewise on that bottom drawing, you could see a 1-story space again heading towards the rear. And that is to add some more living space to connect to the backyard. And then if we flip to the next elevation. Thank you. You could see the top one is seeing the view of the property from the rear. You could see the 1-story aspect, which is that slider right there, and above it is the master. And then on the elevation below, you could see that's the northwestern facade, and you could see the proposed dormer that is needed on the 3rd floor in order to access it for headroom. There currently is a staircase going up to the 3rd floor, but it's probably about 2 feet wide. You have to sort of shimmy sideways to get up, and you still don't have enough headroom going up there. So this would provide comfortable, clean, safe access to the 3rd floor. The intent with this dormer was try to stay as minimal in its presence, and that we pushed it back from the front facade by 5 foot 6 inches. You could see in the dimensions on this drawing, it's 12 foot 6 long, trying to keep a long, skinny sort of glass exposure there with some awnings. To provide light into the stairwell, and then also to provide light to the middle of the 3rd floor. As for the exterior treatment, we're proposing 2/2 windows to replace the existing 1/1s. We're restoring all the existing trim in regards to the casings and the corner boards, eaves, fascia, frieze boards. There's definitely decay, rot in the eaves. There's definitely critters living on the 3rd floor currently. So all of that would be restored in wood to clean that up and make it sort of fresh and safe from other critters. The siding is proposed to be hardy plank clapboards. If we flip back to the front elevation, just to see that one more time, thank you. The original front door and sidelights will remain, but the stairs leading up to it will be rebuilt at a more gradual pitch. Overall, the assessment was that the bones of the original 1850 structure is actually in great shape. The owners would just like to bring the back portion of the house up to the same level of dignity as the front has. So that's our intent with the project. Again, sort of conceptually, it's so similar in concept to the original, what's there now as far as the addition, but it just, the goals were just to rebuild it in a way that could be lasting as the front portion is. But I believe that covers everything on the architectural end, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may come along.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Graff. I know I had one, like, I noticed there was that one side section has board and batten siding. Was there, I was curious as to the design decision behind that choice.
Sure, it was a feeling as to, it's certainly a long building when you look at it, and it was a way that we were feeling could start to break up the continuous sort of monotony of the clapboards. That was the hope there, and sort of lighten it up with less body color but more trim.
Yeah, I spent some time trying to figure that one out, and I finally realized that when you in this view, it's hard to tell because it's a two-dimensional view of it, but that sort of middle window in that section is actually several feet back in. That's sort of like a little vestibule type area. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's recessed back, exactly, to create a covered space for people to come and go.
Right.
So that was sort of a protected landing into a mudroom.
Okay, and just the other kind of general question, and I'll invite my fellow commissioners to submit their queries on that. Would you say that from the photos and other things, it looks like however that addition, however well it may have been built initially, over the years, and especially in the transition to cutting it up for two family, there was seems like there a lot of what structural integrity it may have once had has been compromised. Like some of the photos showed significant timber beams that were cut up and so forth. Any comment on that? I mean, is that do you think that's part of the problem that as to that has made it put it in the condition that it's in today?
I absolutely agree with that. When you walk through the space, there's the framing. The framing is a whole hodgepodge of history of people adding pieces and parts. The existing, I don't know if we have the existing floor plans, Caitlin, but there's a back room, even that was of that addition that's underneath the deck. Even that feels sort of patched on. The property, one thing I want to talk about is the decay that happens on the back, that happened to the backside of this addition, is because of this huge grade change from the front and back to the property. It's probably about 10 feet, I would think, maybe even more, from the back of the property to Walnut Street, to the sidewalk. So if you can imagine the years and years of water coming back to this house, pouring on the backside, the ground level, the floor level of the back part of the addition is pretty much equal to the grade at the back side. There's no, when Joe Fix commented on the rot in one of his pictures, there's nothing there that has helped that house from the protection from the elements. Everything is draining towards the house. And in fact, the garage has the same condition as we look at this top image. I think it's just, unfortunately, where the water goes, and it's just, and I know you're talking about framing, and the lack of in some locations, but more importantly, it's that over time, the weather has really sort of deteriorated its foundation level. And that's my biggest concern with the existing structure.
Yeah, Caitlin, looked like you were trying to find it. If you want to just find that, Caitlin, I think it's around page 25 and 26. There are some of those
For the
existing plans, yeah. Yeah, is this what you were talking about, That's great.
Well, yes, and actually I can just look at it, it's that, but this is great too. So if you look and it says proposed renovation right in the middle of the addition, existing addition, it's that area there, and the back piece of that, I want to say it's approximately 8 feet, 10 feet of that space it's actually technically finished space, but it feels like it's a storage room the way it's so unfinished, and again at grade, and really marginal in living space. So that's the room that took the brunt of all, has taken over the years of all the water coming its way.
Okay. Well, I have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize too much of the time. Let me see if any of our panelists here, you want to ask a question or make a comment at this point. You can either-
I think we need to talk about historically significant and preferably preserved. If so, I have things to say about historically significant.
Mhm. Okay, well, the main subject of our report is about the historical significance, so go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, since the historical report needs to include the relative importance or place of the property in the context of the block, I'll say it's a street of Greek Revival, Second Empire, and Italianate houses and cottages, all of which were built between 1845 and 1875. After the death of its first owner in 1847, the property was sold by his heirs in 1848. And like the other two oldest houses on the street, one of them being the Greek Revival next door at number 25, and the other being number 1, which is the corner of Walnut and Oakland, it is set back further and sits up at a higher elevation than the other houses on that side of the street. Of course, the prime lots were the places up on the hill. So it sits on that highest point. It's very prominent on the lot, especially as you approach from Oakland Street. It has a lovely barn. I'll say that there are other houses on the street that do have substantial additions in the rear, although they are hidden in the back. But even those houses with those large additions sit rather harmoniously among some of the smaller cottages, and probably it's because all of those houses on the street really present from the street view as houses that have retained their historic profiles. When this house was sold in June as 2 condo units, of course it also listed the addition as having been built in 1850, because that's the Newburyport default date when we don't know. The applicant presents documentation in Exhibit A showing that the addition appears on the Sanborn Map of 1900, so we can say it's a 19th century addition. It looks to me as if the driveway side entrance might be the original entrance, the original main entrance. I think the addition actually is a really good example of what an historic addition on a historic house should look like. It's subordinate, it's stepped back, it's, as the architect said, it's plain, but it has just enough architectural detail in the porch. And the porch, I think, creates that nice transition back to the barn and the large lot. But other than that, it's very simplified. So that's my take on the on the house in the context of the street.
Okay, and Patricia, those last couple comments about that include comments about the porch. You're talking about the existing rear addition.
Yeah, the existing.
Okay.
I mean, that's like if somebody were going to say, I want to build an addition, and we're like, oh, that's terrific. It's smaller, it's lower, it's subordinate setback, but it has its own personality. And again, I like that it's facing what would have been more land, and the lot goes really far back. And the barn, I think it's very attractive in its site and in its form. I don't know if Mr. Morgan or anyone else has anything to add about the house in its architectural features, since the chair has to describe those in his report.
Well, does he?
Oh,
May I speak?
You may, Mr. Morgan.
Well, I looked at the property today, and I have the rear addition is pretty plain and unremarkable. I think that its deference to the main structure in the front is probably its best quality, as Patricia just mentioned. I would say that any structure that if this structure were to be renovated and saved, or a replacement structure were to take its place, that I would advocate that the structure remains in deference to the portion of the original structure, the front portion, and remaining in recess relative to that rear corner. I see that the proposed addition is adding that board and batten single-story structure such that it's coplanar with that very nice pilaster there at the corner, which is of course a distinctive feature of the Greek Revival. And I don't believe that's appropriate. I would say that you need to create a full corner here. This porch does intersect it, but the void is continuous vertically and accentuates the relief of the termination of the main structure. So that's what I would advocate for that. The other thing I see relative to the design that's being proposed is the removal of the side door, and that's fine. I have no criticism relative to that, since we're trying to eliminate the two entries in order to recreate create a single story or single family house. I would try to preserve the bays, though, some indication of the bays by placing 2 additional windows, so that the 5-bay rhythm of that side is maintained, is complete, so that I don't know if there's a way to jig the interior partitions with the proposed plan so that you get the expression of that center bay somehow. I feel that the blank wall there at the center, it makes me feel that there's something missing in that symmetrical facade. So those are my only comments.
Okay. Yeah. And I had the same reaction to the what you refer to the coplanar alignment of that board and batten section there, and that same wall of the main house. All right, thank you, Joe. Peter, I see you're also unmuted. Did you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Well, I was going to say much of what Joe Morgan said. That one-story addition just seems too abrupt a departure from everything that's going on around it. And I understand breaking up of the clapboard, those horizontal lines of the clapboarding with the board and batten, but it just doesn't seem to be in harmony with the rest. I'd love to see a rendering of this, because these elevations don't really do it much justice. And also the absence of the side entry and that window above is pronounced for me. It's a pretty stark plane that's being presented there. Joe's suggestion about adding a 5th bay is certainly interesting. I wonder that we can't just leave the original door and that window, and the door may or may not be functional. I'd ask what Joe Morgan asked. What is behind there? Is it possible to retain those 2 features? Because it's a very noticeable absence to me.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Let's see. Caitlin, looks like, did Ron ever join the call?
No, he hasn't yet. Malcolm was here for a moment, but has since left.
Geez, okay. All right. The couple of one of the questions I had was what it well one of the in your introductory remarks, Attorney Mead, you talked about the determination regarding or the historical commission's opinion or view of the conditions report. And you know, we've had some internal dialogue between myself and the staff and so on about, you know, that whole issue. And because a number of us on this board don't feel that we are personally qualified and, you know, to evaluate the, you know, structural integrity types of issues. So one of so that we have some questions around that, and Mr. Fix, I tried to look him, well, I didn't try, I looked him up and mainly found information about his outdoor sculpture, very little about the structural engineering, other than that he's a licensed structural engineer. So there's no question about that qualification, but does nothing about any expertise in the relevant area of antique house restoration and rehab and that sort of thing. And any comment on that?
I do, and Eileen can speak more to the qualifications of Mr. Fix than myself. But you're correct. You know, the purview of the Historic Commission under the DCOD specifically is to discuss the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demolition. So that would be, you know, the rear portion of the structure being proposed for demolition, and then the relevant importance of that building or structure in the context of the neighborhood, as Ms. Pecknick has discussed. I say that, you know, I don't know that the zoning board says, looks to the commission to say, oh, is it structurally unsafe? Or is it structurally unsound? I think that my experience has been, and the way I've interpreted is that they look to the commission to say, okay, would it destroy the historic significance of the structure if you removed the addition or that portion of the structure that's being proposed to be removed? And so while this is not a demolition delay, is it historically significant and should it be preferably preserved? That's a different ordinance, right?
Yeah.
The question is, if it's removed, does it destroy the historic significance of the structure? And but they do look to your opinion about that. You know, they do look and see, did you look at it? Did you see the report? But then it's up to them for sure to decide, not the commission. I do think, though, that it is important to note, because I think that, you know, every once in a while we practice this stuff so much, right? You do it every 2 weeks. I do it pretty frequently as well, to bring ourselves back to the ordinance. And I think this discussion around that center door is significant relative to what the ordinance in the DCOD actually says, wherein it says for the DCOD that this section is not intended to regulate the mere alteration of a historic building or structure, even if such alteration involves the demolition of a character-defining exterior architectural feature. So, you know, if you were downtown, that would be different. But in the DCOD, it's not the same. And so I think certainly your opinions relative to the door and the rhythm and the plane of that particular side, obviously you're entitled to your opinion. But that's not really in the purview, because that's not what's being, you know, the main part of the house, demolition under this section is not occurring. So we provide the report from the structural engineer as part of the consideration of the commission, because I think it's important to give you all of the information that we have. And, you know, certainly if the house if that addition was intact and solid and didn't have the problems that this has or other similar situations have, you might have a different opinion about it. But it was clearly later added, later being relative, of course, and has significant problems. It wasn't built, doesn't have the same bones, doesn't have the same foundation, wasn't built as structurally sound, and has taken a beating, as Eileen has explained. So I guess that's a long way around the fact that I think it's important for the commission to understand what the condition of the building is.
Yeah.
Glenn, do we need to make a determination of historically significant and preferably preserved? The applicant has said so in their application.
Um,
No.
Not really. No,
Okay.
it's
I just read from the letter.
but
Okay.
that it's, we sort of, in practical terms, we sort of do that in the report, because if because we're going to, it is a historical report, so we're going to say what the historical significance of that structure is, or that part of the structure, basically the whole thing, and opine with our sage wisdom as to its preservation and so on. I'm a little, I think, Ms. Mee, where we're a little hung up on is the there's this whole, which comes, cart before the horse, horse before the cart type situation, and that the ZBA, hasn't seen any of this yet. They've got to decide about, make a determination, and they're going to be looking at the conditions report and all that. If we, I think a number of us are feeling we should recommend that they have someone who has expertise in historic structures confirm Mr. Fix's findings. Based on the photos, I can't honestly say I've got grounds for doubting them or disputing them, but that might be something that they might want to look at. And the other thing is, frankly, I would disagree with your interpretation of section 28E, where number 1, where it talks about the intent of this section. It says, the intent of this section is to prevent the demolition of historic buildings and structures located within the DCOD. In addition to special permit criteria, blah, blah, blah. That's when it follows that sentence with the section is not intended to regulate the mere alteration of historic building or structure. And then, as you said, so my interpretation of that is that this section involves demolition. And they've set the threshold of 25% and all that. So they're just so it reads to me that they are saying this is about avoiding demolition in total or in excess of 25%. It's not as if your project involves, let's say your project didn't involve any, demolition. It was just the removal of that top second story window on the door. Then you're right. If that's all involved, that this particular ordinance wouldn't apply. So anyway, that's how I read that. So
Glenn,
yeah.
if we keep reading in that section too, it says historic buildings shall be preserved and repaired rather than demolished whenever reasonably feasible. Right. And determining reasonable feasibility is a task for the ZBA. So it says, the zoning board must find that the portion to be demolished retains no substantial remaining market value or reasonable use, taking into account the cost of rehabilitation to meet the requirements of the state building code as it applies to historic structures or buildings. Yeah. Because the state building code has some flexibility for historic structures. And in the language of the DCOD ordinance, we see that a professional is needed to determine substantial remaining market value. A professional is needed to calculate an estimate of reasonable cost to rehabilitate up to building codes. And the special permit granting authority must require that the owner pay the ZBA to engage a professional to report upon the feasibility of preservations and that estimate. And in the section on advisory reports, it mentions a properly licensed architect or engineer experienced in the restoration of historic structures or recognized building specialist. And so all that we can do is, yes, we've read the letter from Mr. Fix and some letters from neighbors who say that, there's significant disrepair. Mr. Fix says it's an unstable condition and it's a bouncy floor and it's unsafe, but it's a third of the house. And so I think there's some contradiction with the fact that, that part of the house sold in June for, $250,000, its assessed value, according to the city in 2019, was $243,700. So I think the ZBA needs to resolve those issues, and that if we need to speak on our best guess about the condition, then that's one thing. But we are not going to determine whether or not I would like it restored and rehabilitated. So if anyone wants my opinion on that's it. But I don't think that we can reach a finding that it has no substantial value or that it's unsafe.
Yeah, and to that last point, Ms. Mead or anyone for the applicant, was there a reappraisal of some sort done to determine the, no substantial remaining value? How was that arrived at?
Well, no, we've done so I'm going to ask two things. We've provided, so first of all, of course, as you know, that's a determination for the ZBA. Secondly, Mr. Fix has made that determination based upon his expert experience as a structural engineer. And I think that to your earlier comment about somebody who is in the business of restoring historic structures and working in historic structures. So first of all, Mr. Fix does work all around the city of Newburyport. He's done work and has actually presented his reports to you before. Steve Dodge, who is a well-known contractor that does antique houses, is doing work on this house. And I think Steve might be on the phone, and perhaps Steve can might be on this call, and perhaps Steve can talk about his findings and the condition of that rear addition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and in that regard, I was thinking, I see there are a number of other people in attendance. Although this isn't a quote unquote public hearing, I was thinking of if there are members of the public who would like to express a point of view to allow that. So why don't I open that up? But with and I see a hand raised already. But before I recognize that person, Mr. Dodge, I see your audio has been permitted. Did you want to make a comment on this topic, Steve?
Yes.
Steve Dodge. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Glenn. Hi, Commission.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I went all through this before Jeff and Nora bought the place, and I knew their intentions. And having been through it, that rear addition is a mess. And like Eileen had talked about, the grades are horrible there, and that back room is, the soil is just about in the door. I mean, it's a mess, and the crawl space is all chopped up. It's rubble. At one time, there was some masonry in there, which was it's just on a pile of rubble. I mean, the masonry was removed at some time, and it's just, the place is a mess. There's really no way to bring that back. It's been butchered. Some of the photos actually showed, some of the framing for the second floor. There it is, right there, the top photo. It's just, there's nothing holding that up, nothing at all. And the assisted rafters up top, it was already mentioned, the collar ties aren't correct. I mean, the place is a mess, and it needs to come down.
Is it a mess, Steve?
It is a mess.
Okay, that makes 6 times we said mess. All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dodge, a former colleague of ours. I see a hand up. Looks like Tom Colderjohn, and I see you've been talking has been enabled. So did you want to say something?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is Tom Colderjohn, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. I have a number of comments about this project. I'm actually a little surprised. Earlier, I thought that I wouldn't even have to comment on this project because I thought it was heading in the right direction. And I am disappointed. there's a lot more demolition than is obvious in the rear. And I'll list a few points. One is it has a wonderful original Greek Revival chimney. And you see it in the pictures existing. It's a wonderful, and it's original. And I think it ought to be retained. It's an exterior feature as well as, of course, an interior feature. It could easily be retrofitted with, say, for instance, if somebody wanted the ease of a gas fireplace, that could easily be installed without taking down the whole chimney and ruining the impact of this fairly majestic chimney from the streetscape. I think it has an impact on the neighborhood. Another thing that they're demolishing is the early clapboards. They're early. They may or may not be the original. They appear to be original, but they could be easily repaired. Hardy plank is a synthetic substance. Its longevity is still not determined, but what it does is if removing the original or the early clapboards, the hardy plank is basically flat. You have less of a shadow. It's not beveled. In fact, I know several developers who refuse to use it now. Moisture gets trapped behind it easily. And there are a number of negatives about it. There are reports about it and so forth. Another thing that they're demolishing is the side entrance and that second, I guess you'd call it the middle fifth bay window. And that side entrance, I believe, is original. It needs a new entablature above it, but I believe it's original to the building. And you know, if this is a restoration, I mean, I think it ought to be preserved. I think a new entablature above the transom ought to be installed. I think when you take it out and you look at basically 4 windows up top and 4 in the bottom, it looks like the building was, I don't know, it was emptied or something. There's a big empty bay, and I think it's a mistake. I agree with the comments on the board and Batten. It's inappropriate and don't fit in with this house. I note that the plans call for 2/2 windows. I think 606, 6/6 would look better and more appropriate. I also question, and perhaps it could be explained better to me. Eileen Graff commented that the existing trim will be restored, and in today's world, when people say that, and other people have said it, and I'm not doubting Eileen's word at all, but what does that mean? Does that mean the bulk of the trim, like the corner boards, the soffits, the window trim and so forth, will be preserved and not just removed and replaced with something similar? That's not restoration. That's replacement. So I'm hoping that there will be more questions about what that means, and perhaps Eileen can explain it. So in summation, I am disturbed and upset about the direction of this, and I think it didn't need to go in this direction. I think it would be much more beneficial to the neighborhood if it went to more preservation of the original features that are clearly evident on this building. That, you know, those window trims, you know, they're original. So they should primarily be preserved. The ones that can't be preserved should be replicated, but not in mass. What you don't want to see in this wonderful building is a totally new looking building. You want it restored, but you want it to look wonderful. And I think your neighbor, your abutter, Bronson de Stadler, would certainly appreciate it. I don't know if he's on tonight or not, but he's on the board of the Preservation Trust, and I'm sure he would appreciate more preservation than demolition, which appears to be apparent. I thought the only issue that would be a big issue tonight would be the dormer, and I was totally wrong, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, we didn't
Thank
even
you
get
for
to
letting
that.
me talk.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Is it
As long
okay?
as-
Is it okay if I give clarity to the trim and the moldings?
Yes, that sounds like Eileen Graff. Yes, I was going to ask you, Ms. Graff, if you'd like
Okay.
to comment on that.
Of course. So the owners, Nora and Jeff, appreciate the history in this town. Jeff grew up here, and so it's been a long time goal to move back to the area. So they appreciate the detail and the history on the exterior in regards to the existing moldings. You know, the intent is not to replace; it's to restore. The detailing on the corner boards are significant in width. I think it's over 13 inches wide. So that, and the casings, same thing, to repair where needed. So that, and all the detail around and the trim work was intended to remain where possible and restored when it shows deterioration. So that's our intent with the project for the overall integrity of that detail.
Okay, thank you. And if you heard that, I said thank you, Ms. Graff. I see another hand raised. And by the way, Stephanie and let's see, Nikita, you're going to be permitted, but before you say anything, Caitlin, I see Malcolm in the attendees list. So is it possible to make him a panelist, you know, or is it not possible?
I just did. So.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, good. Okay, so Stephanie Nikitich, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Stephanie Nikitich, 93 High Street. If I may, I do have a comment, but I wondered if first I could ask a question that may actually be, if not a question for you, Mr. Chairman, a question for Caitlin.
Mm-hmm.
So when this application first appeared around August 12th on your agenda, it appeared as a roofline demo delay. And now that's not mentioned anywhere. So my question is, does the proposed dormer meet the requirements for exclusion from demo delay, or is there really two things before you? Is there a roofline demo delay, which is a different thing and even a different process, or does the dormer meet the requirements of the demo delay ordinance?
Glenn, it's Caitlin. Would you like me to answer that, or did you want to?
Sure. Well, why don't you go first?
Okay. Hi, Stephanie. It's Caitlin Sullivan from the planning office. You're right. When this project first came in, there was two applications. One, asking for the NHC to give an advisory report, and one, a demo delay application. But our zoning administrator had clarified for the applicant once that over 25% is triggered, and then thus needing a DCOD special permit, that process kind of takes over and is the kind of umbrella review process for both the demo and the dormer, which does not meet, the as of right dimensions.
Okay, thank you. Then I just, I think it's important whether the process has been collapsed or not. The issue of the dormer is present. it is part of roofline demolition. And so it can't, I don't think it can be ignored by the NHC. And I also think that the delay can still be imposed if that's what the commission wants to do. So thank you for that. My comments are number one, on the question of removing a door and window on the main building. Because we're already over 25%, that's still demolition. So it is, you know, it is certainly, I think, you know, I agree with commissioners who have said that's part of the demolition. It's not just removal of, you know, absent the 25% feature. It is exterior demolition. So I think it's perfectly right that you have an opinion on that. I also agree with the commission that the question of whether or not this, you know, there's substantial remaining value, that's, you know, it's a burden to ask you guys to tell the ZBA something that you haven't actually examined yourselves. Even though it may be completely true, that's the applicant needs to go to the ZBA with that argument. Finally, I agree with commission members who say that if there is a new addition, that it should preserve that differential of the current addition to the main building, and that a porch rather than an enclosed board and batten addition, which becomes equal to the plane of the main building wall, is disruptive to the historic integrity of this building. So we're not talking about a new addition where an applicant could say, well, we should differentiate it, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, I think you should be talking more about a reconstruction of a historic addition, because they say the only reason they want to take it down is it's structurally unsound. If that's true, okay, but even though it's gotten a little longer, could the architectural features of that addition be reconstructed? So I hope that can be the case, and I hope that there is a discussion about that dormer, because it's pretty inappropriate and it's right on the street. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we didn't even get to really talk about the dormer, but I know a number of us have certainly thought about it. Just let me make a note here. Let me go back to some of our commissioners here. Well, actually, first of all, now that we've gotten our Malcolm back in, you're welcome to join up, comment, and if you want, Malcolm, and especially I'd like to know how, I couldn't tell if you were here for the whole thing or not, so we would need to know that. But anyway, would anyone who already gave an opinion, like Mr. Morgan, Pecknick, Peter, any, I know, Joe, I don't think you mentioned the dormer. I don't think you did, Peter, although now I'm not so sure. But anyone, anyway, long story short, would anyone like to offer an opinion or comment on that?
I feel that there should be a demo delay on the dormer, because the dormer and everything that's happening with the demo of the door and the window on the original house, everything is premised on what the addition will look like if there is an addition. So I think you might have mentioned carts and horses.
I did.
I think that the ZBA has to determine whether this structure is a candidate for demolition, and then we have to talk about the roof line change on the main house. I don't know.
Well, legally, we don't have the option of imposing the traditional demo delay under the ordinance. However, in we do have an obligation to advise the ZBA on, whether we feel the plans are, appropriate or not. We can certainly, comment on that and make our recommendations about that. So the form it would take, rather than a demo delay, would be that if it should happen that based on the conditions report and everything else, maybe there's site visits that either, they want to do. And I wanted to ask you guys also if you want to do a site visit, if that would help. But in any event, that we could certainly make whatever recommendations we'd like as far as what we think is appropriate or not in their proposed plans. You see what I'm saying?
I see.
At least that's my understanding of the ordinance. Caitlin, does that sound pretty much like how you understand the ordinance as well?
Yeah, that's my understanding, as the
Yeah.
ZBA is the special granting authority on this one.
Yeah, and so, because it's a special permit, procedure, there is no quote demo delay. In fact, I think it specifically says in the ordinance, there's no demo delay.
Okay, I'm just reading from the applicant's letter that said, "I hope you will find a historically significant impression." So I'm just taking it literally and making sure that that's what it says. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that as well.
That's from the old process, right? That's before it got collapsed into the.
It's still a current process. It's just a different process.
Right. If I could, Mr. Chair, just to clarify it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Patricia, you're correct. There was a change in interpretation. And so that's why Jennifer made the determination that she did. So we made that we actually changed our cover letter to address Jennifer's issue. But because there was the dormer that didn't meet the ordinance, that was our first assumption. And Jennifer corrected that, given that it's subject to the DCOD.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'll ask one more time. Does anyone, like Peter, Joe, Chris, anyone want to weigh in with an opinion on that dorm, as long as it's become a topic? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I can.
Sounded like Mr. Fay.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a matter of consistency. I said that before. We consistently, or some of us, are not big fans of the dormers. And, when I first joined the commission, I didn't really know one dormer from another, but it seemed to have been a concern. And we've seen weird dormers. And so that would be one concern. Conversely, I've walked by this house a lot of times with the view of like, wow, that's a really nice looking house. I hope somebody buys it and fixes it up and redoes it. And then I walked by it one time and they were throwing stuff out. So I don't have any doubt from just a layman's point of view that there's significant issues with it. I know Steve, and I think I trust Steve, his assessment of it. The addition to me seems strange as it exists. And it's just a layman's point of view, but it looks like a Greek Revival house with a farmhouse back attached to it.
I could see that.
It just looks like a farmhouse porch to me. And, so maybe there's a compromise there, but just walking by it, it just looks like it looks sort of odd given the main structure. So I don't have any problems with the door going, the porch going, any of that stuff. I don't know what it would look like, and maybe the clapboard, maybe it has to be clapboarded, but that's just my sort of 2 cents.
Okay. I have a question from Ms. Graff. It looks like, the dormer that's proposed is not particularly big. Is it merely the fact that it goes up to the existing ridge line that's the non-conforming part? Can you comment on why it wouldn't be possible, or maybe it is possible, to make a dormer that is more compliant with the most recent regulations on dormers?
In order to, so it currently steps back, it meets the front setback. the requirement. 5'6" will meet that. It's the 8 inches from the wall plane below, and it's really a struggle from the interior point of view. In order to meet, it's the staircase. The original staircase exists right below it. So what you're trying to do is follow that same path up to the 3rd floor. If you meet the exclusion of for that dormer, to meet the ordinance, you have to create a stair that is now, instead of the 3 foot that it said, you have to push it inbound along with the edge of this dormer. So that's the struggle is, right now you're losing another, it's just has a significant impact on the 2nd floor plan as well as the 3rd floor plan. Right. So in this location, in this situation with the stair right there, the original stair, it's a hard one to comply to. Right. This 8 inches was trying to give the nod, the relief. We want more roof there in order to separate and give minimal impact of the wall that's exposed. But yet we just need to give the minimum amount of headroom. So if that helps with the discussion of,
what was the
size and the scale.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in my head. What is the required? You've got where you've currently got 8 inches set back from the wall below. What does the ordinance ask for the by right?
We need to go 1'6" back.
Okay, so 18 inches. All right.
Yeah, so if I could actually make a point relative to a comment, I don't recall exactly who said it earlier, but Caitlin, if you could go to some of the neighborhood photos that I provided, and it's the photo looking to the right of the house opposite the driveway, not that one. Go to the next one. It's not that one either. Keep going. Nope. There's one that's taken that looks right at the, no, it's the neighborhood photos. So it's the like broader ones. And I have it in front of me. I just don't know what number it is on the screen. Why don't you just go through the neighborhood ones, and there it is right there. So this is the house. This is the side of the house that the dormer's on. There are trees there. You can't see this. When you're walking up the street, given the fact that it's set 5 feet back, Eileen, is that right? 6 feet back?
Over 5'6".
5'6" back from the front edge of the house, plus the trees, both on the neighboring property and this property. This dormer does not stand out in the middle of the street or the sidewalk. And there are other dormers in the neighborhood. And I know that is certainly not a reason, and the commission can decide what it does. But in this instance, Eileen has taken great care to make it as low profile as possible, and still be able to build the stairwell over the existing stairs. And in addition, the reality is it just doesn't stick out. It just physically doesn't do it, given the existing landscaping and the trees that exist in the neighborhood. I just think this is a really good photo.
And it's a good point, because I do likewise. I keep walking by the house. I keep looking up to what would be seen. I know there's resistance for the shed dormer. But yet, in many ways, for argument's sake, could it be a Nantucket dormer? Sure, probably. It could give the doghouse look from the gable end, but in many ways that seems too overdone for the building. Again, go back to that addition on the back, very simple, very plain. I felt that the shed dormer was the quietest type of dormer for this situation, and that would blend in. So we did give a lot of thought to that dormer, and we just felt that by being a shed, as small in footprint as possible.
Mhm.
And I'm going to speak up quickly just to agree with Chris on the dormers. It does impact the house. And I understand that on a lovely summer day, there's leaves, but our New England summers are very short. And so all the other times of the year, there's the dormer. I just would not
You
want
don't like the idea. The Ms. Griff, was there any compelling reason why the roof of the dormer had to go all the way up to the existing ridge versus, you know, being slightly flatter in pitch so it wouldn't go right up to the ridge line of the main house? Still with us?
Eileen? Hang on a second.
Okay, see, she's
Oh, she's popped off just for a second, so she'll be.
oh, there she goes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Here you know.
Sorry. I had technical difficulties there. I'm now on my phone. So, so as far as going not to the ridge,
Right.
it's certainly possible. You get real shallow. It's very shallow as it is. So what you're talking about now is a rubber roof. I think about those kind of things because you start to be too shallow, almost flat. So I thought that was less attractive because it's not, if we had more pitch to it, I would happily go below the ridge, but that was my reaction.
Okay.
Again, almost 6 feet back from the front elevation.
Okay. All right. I'd like to wrap this up, but I do see one hand raised on the attendees. So I don't want to avoid it. Do you see that, Caitlin? Person listed as Skip Short has got a hand up. Mr. Short, I assume it's a Mr. Did you want to make a quick comment for the sake of time? We'd appreciate brevity.
Yeah, I think I had raised my hand when the commentary started about the.
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, that's okay. And it was just about the dormer and the fact that none of the drawings show the large magnolia tree that we have in that corner of our property. And, you know, and so I don't even think that the dormer would be viewable, probably not at all from the street, probably not even from our yard. And then the other comment that I was going to make is that a dormer by itself is not inconsistent with other houses that are in the neighborhood. In fact, the house at 12 California Street directly across the street has recently added, since I used to own that house at one point, but it didn't have a dormer. It now has a full dormer the whole length of the back. And then at 12 Walnut Street, which is directly across from 12 California, has a full dormer on both sides of that house. And those are both the Greek Revival style. So I don't think the dormer would be inconsistent. The other comment that I would make is as a owner of 25 Walnut for the last 15 years, I've unfortunately watched the quality of this house just fall into disrepair, which is really unfortunate. And I think one thing that shouldn't be overlooked here is that the Dodge family is going to invest quite a lot of money to try and bring this back to a safe house, one that doesn't have squirrels running throughout it, one that is really, in terms of historical significance, going back to be a single family house, not another two-family like the rest of Newburyport has become. So I really hope that those things can be taken into consideration as the commission makes its decisions and its findings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Short. So you're the abutter on that northern side there. Okay.
I apologize that my RV made it into some of the pictures.
That's quite all right. All right, thank you. Don't forget to put your hand down, by the way. All right, I'd like to try to wrap this up. Just a quick question. I want to get just a quick straw poll. I don't think, is there a sense among the commissioners that anyone would like to make a site visit to see the existing conditions in person, or do people not feel that's necessary? Any feelings on that?
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Anyone else? Was that Peter that spoke up? Anyone else have an interest in that? And would that make people feel a little more comfortable as far as, weighing, now I don't want to go over the ground we've already tread over many times already, but I know it's, we're not structural engineers, but just to get a more firsthand impression on site of these conditions. Is anyone else interested in doing that? Not seeing much interest. All right. Well, I am actually a little bit myself. Ms. Mead or the applicant or anyone up there, is that something that you'd be willing to arrange?
If you could wait 1 second, Mr. Chair, this
Sure.
is a difficult conversation, as you know, so hang on. Yeah, I think that's fine. We can arrange that.
All right. What I know I'm going to be. Maybe we can. Peter, and Peter and Lisa, will address you as speaking for the applicant. Would sometime on Sunday work for folks? Particularly later in the day, because I know I have to be away for sometime Friday and probably most of Saturday.
Yes, Sunday works.
I assume I understand, Lisa, you need to you're probably trying to communicate a number of different directions here. So
yeah.
Do we need to establish the time here and now?
Yeah, we do. So hang on 1 second.
It would be, yeah, it works out easier, Peter, because that way we don't have to, it avoids a lot of other juggling of phone calls and whatever.
And frankly, if it makes it any easier, I went by the property today. I need to go by it again just to take a closer look at the dormer, the proposed dormer, given what's been presented.
Yep.
I don't really need to be there with anybody else. So.
Okay.
Well, technically you do.
Well, I think what Peter means is just looking at it from the sidewalk.
From the street, I certainly don't need to be with anybody else.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's my question. Or, Mr. Chair, do you want to go through the see around the back of the house? What's the if Peter can look at the front, then you're just looking at a continuance, I guess.
Well,
which is kind of disappointing, but okay. Well,
in any event, we don't really make any decision, quote unquote, tonight anyway. We have to draw up a report. I think for myself personally, I think I would like to look at some of those, that addition part again, which would require someone being there, because obviously I'm not going to just go in there, especially if there is issues of the safety.
Right, but from an open meeting law point of view, you're going to need to, if you are getting more information and Peter is getting more information, you're going to have to come back to a meeting in order to finalize your advisory report. You can't get more information outside of public meeting, and then, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So, yes, 4 o'clock on Sunday. How will that work?
I think that would work for me. Would that work for you, Peter?
One moment.
Let me double check. As long as we're. That's Sunday the 30th, right?
Yes.
No, I'm afraid it wouldn't. I spoke too soon. Sunday is not good.
All right. Would Lisa, can you, the applicant, propose any? No, you're working, right, Peter?
Monday.
So
Anytime Monday.
I'm blocked out from Sunday morning until Tuesday night. Blacked out, I should say. I can honestly do what I need to do without going on the property. So
Glenn, do you want to meet there at 4 o'clock on Sunday?
Yeah, could we make it just a little bit later, like 4:30?
Oh, sure.
because that will give me a little extra time because I may have to be coming back from Vermont on Sunday morning. Okay, yeah, 4:30 Sunday. And if anyone else in the commission would like to join us, take a look at things, that's the time. Okay, well, let's, yeah, so we'll have, we'll rejoin the issue, I guess at our first meeting in September, which I think would be, let's see, August, September 10th, is that, yeah. And so we can,
So you'll continue this matter till September 10th, Mr. Chair?
yes.
Does there need to be a vote on that, Glenn? Or is it just different because it's?
On continuing it?
Yeah, or is it just because it's an advisory opinion, we're just not voting to continue it?
No, you should, I would personally, just to make it proper, I would like you to vote, please.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Since I'm the one that's kind of creating this whole problem, if you want to call it a problem, I'll make the motion. I would like to ask the commission to approve a continuance, again, without prejudice, to our next meeting, September 10th, to allow us some additional time for in-person site visit on the part of the chair and anyone else who would like to do that. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so I'll go around my list here. Oops, sorry, let me get the right thing so I don't forget anyone. The, okay, Mr. Fay, do you have a vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, Ron's not with us. Now, Malcolm, I don't know if you can talk or not. Looks, did you ever get added to the, I thought I saw him in there. I don't know, he's been kind of in and out. Is he in? Oh dear, well, we may have lost
He's been,
Malcolm.
Glenn, he's been in and out and looks like he's not on the call right now.
All right, so we'll skip that. But it looks, I think, sounds like the motion passed in anyway. All right, well, thank you, fellow commissioners, for allowing me that little diversion. Okay, well, thanks for your patience. To Ms. Mead and to the Dodges, all of the various Dodgers in attendance. I guess there were several. Appreciate your patience with this. We will, try to move along expeditiously. Get that site visit done. There's probably things I can start as terms of authoring a historical report and so on, and we'll try to not hold things up too much. There's one. I'd like to get one other thing that I'm thinking we're taking a vote on. Does the, let me see how I want to phrase this as a motion. Is the sense of the commission, okay, let me phrase this as a motion. Just give me a second here. I guess the motion would be that the commission, the NHC, includes in its report a recommendation to the ZBA to have some sort of second opinion from on the what's it called?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Yeah.
With all due respect, you've just continued.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I was just thinking of that too, Ms. Mead, now that you mentioned it. So does that mean it's closed for this meeting, so to speak?
I would respectfully suggest that in fact does mean that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't legally disagree with that, so we'll leave it at that. All right. Well, then I'll just say what I said before. Thank you for your patience, and we'll rejoin this in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. We do have some other things on the agenda. Mainly the report from our Commissioner Patricia Pecknick and approval of minutes. So let's turn to, is this, I see Caitlin is showing something. Patricia, is this from your presentation?
This is, do you want to approve the minutes first, and then whoever doesn't want to listen to this can bail out? It's probably not more than 15 or 20 minutes, but
Well, I'm shocked that you would think anyone would would want to
I mean,
skip your
as I said,
presentation.
these are the worst slides ever. Okay, well, feel free to stop your video and, you know, have a beer and whatever, watch Netflix while I'm doing this. But I did want to share some of the things that I got out of it, virtually attending the National Alliance of Preservation Commission's annual conference. So that's an organization that provides a forum for members of historical commissions all around the country to talk about like mutual problems and preservation in their communities and share best strategies to serve cities, counties, and states. They're partnered with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the National Park Service, the Federal Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. So the speakers included like the General Counsel of the National Trust, the Director of the National Trust Preservation Green Lab, which is the environmental sustainability research arm of the trust. These are the folks who draft National Trust policy briefs. They write books on historic preservation law, review properties that are eligible for inclusion in the National Register, and for tax credit purposes. Some of the speakers were code enforcement officers in major cities that have, you know, 9,000 contributing structures, many city planners from cities as different as, you know, Denver is from Baltimore. Actually, Denver has 56 historic districts. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And many of these communities have full-time salaried historic preservation officers with a staff of 12. There were also people there from rural preservation districts. I didn't know there were such things, but they're trying to protect farm buildings, landscapes, and historic outbuildings. The conference provides educational credits for members of the American Institute of Architects and the American Institute of Certified Planners. So I discovered it at the last minute. I figured for $100 registration, I would watch the sessions. It was 5 days long, sessions all day long. I especially enjoyed the 2 sessions on interpreting the Secretary's standards. So a lot of this was like, what would you do if this were proposed? And it was really fun to argue with people, you know, when it's not in your own community, and it doesn't really matter what gets approved because you'll never go to Michigan and see it. But so this first slide, it's, you know, this 1880 Italianate, and they surveyed us to see, like, do you think in your community you would allow an addition that doubles the size of the house? Most commissions said no, actually said yes. What happened in this historic district is that everybody in town was doubling the size of their house until there was not one single house left that retained its original form. And people couldn't even remember what the original sizes were. And so this house, you know, they approved it, they put this big addition on, and then the state surveyed it and removed it from contributing status. They said, sorry, it no longer contributes. And people in that town care about whether something is contributing or not because their town has property tax abatement for having and maintaining a house that is listed as contributing. We couldn't do that because everything's contributing, but in towns where not that many properties are, there's tax incentives for you.
Interesting.
So the owner then was upset. I lost my tax abatement. I got a bigger house.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion of the fact that this was a corner lot. You know, maybe the addition should be lower, stepped in subordinate. The word subordinate came up constantly. It was, I wanted a t-shirt that said subordinate with a question because that's what everyone talked about. The consensus was, yes, generally it does mean smaller in size. Although some people pointed out it can be the same massing as long as it's separated by a connector, unless it then intrudes into an historic district, then it must be subordinate also in relationship to other historic properties. People talked about, you know, does it overtake the view? I was thinking of Christopher Fay, you know, when you walk down the street and you're just thinking, are you going to ask, how did this happen? The next slide is an 1888 electric company station. They removed the roof truss of the smokestack. They restored the original window openings, restored the facade. And I sort of objected to this exercise because I needed to know where the building is, right? If this is in a building where this is the first such bold experiment, I don't know, but it turns out it was in San Francisco, and it seemed like that was just the kind of environment in which to do something like this. Proponents argued that the housing complex, parking garage and housing complex on the top, it looks like two separate structures because it's so far away. Opponents complain that it's facadism, you know, taking the facade of an historic structure for reasons of nostalgia, you know, and sort of using it to decorate this new, it's sort of a gimmick, right? And I think, to me, it would depend on whether they were saving the building by using it as the basis for this new design, or whether they could have found someone to, you know, restore the building and put it to some other use. Many people thought it violated standard 1 that says choose a use that requires minimal building changes. Other people complain that it's not reversible. And I was wondering, Joe, like, you know, maybe in Cambridge or Boston, right, this would be very exciting in some environments. People would say this looks like, you know, Kendall Square, the sci-tech buildings, sort of. The next slide, this was way over my head because we're talking about materials. The new owner wanted to restore the building, but the materials are no longer manufactured. So they did their best to replicate them. And this generated a lot of debate about standard 6, which is the repair via replacement standard. And people were trying to figure out whether there should be a hard number on the percentage of materials that must be in need of repair in order to trigger an allowance for wholesale replacement. So people were saying, like for windows, should it be 50% of the windows need to be repaired? Go ahead and replace. Should it be 60%? Window restoration, another very popular topic. The next one, I was thinking of Ron in this one because he's so compassionate and sensitive about the applicants. And this is in Denver at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church from 1907. They had a parking lot, and they had a problem with people affected by homelessness. And so they proposed this small complex with a pavilion and a bathhouse, like a tiny little village for women affected by homelessness. So everyone had their little cabin. And the Historical Commission there said, you know, they really appreciated the mission here. And they appreciated that it was reversible because the structures are built on sticks. They were subordinate to the historic church, but they worried about the impact of the historic district. They said there is no precedent in the district for these temporary structures, and that they didn't want to set a precedent for other tiny houses around the historic district. And there is a sort of tiny house movement. There are people who are fascinated with, you know, building 400 square feet houses. Advocates said that anything is better than an asphalt parking lot. The commission said to the church, sorry, not compatible. And the church came back with a design for a big apartment building on the lot. And the commission members said no. And that using the standards, we can not only impose limitations, sometimes we can tell an applicant that they just can't do anything on that structure or site. So that never got built. The next slide, public art, you know, this also a lot of debate. So it's an 1877 building in an historic district in Texas, in the courthouse square, and the commission approved a painting on the side of the building, but not the facade. And the building owner ended up having a wraparound mural. And, you know, the pro mural people said, what the heck, you know, there's not much left of the building anyway, to, you know, that's sort of the original materials. And this will bring more young people into the historic district. But opponents said you have to destroy the brick in order to ever reverse this mural. And so they ended up making them remove the paint from the facade and leave the mural on the side. We don't have such issues here. So the key takeaway—
Not yet anyway.
Not yet. The key takeaway from that part of the discussion was, you know, the Secretary's standards are national standards for preservation. They're the basis of most local design guidelines. And they also provide a preservation philosophy, right? They're the overarching standards. The standards don't just say, do what you want, but sort of bend it in this direction. Sometimes they say you can't do anything here and still abide by the standards. So someone mentioned they're a floor, not a ceiling. I sort of like that. They're the minimum that must be satisfied. And the discussion about subordinate again went on, and people said there's not one answer about what subordinate means, but there is an answer about what it means in your district, and you're in charge of that answer if you are on an historical commission. The next slide, this was a lot of young people in preservation are talking about this Beyond Integrity movement, which these are folks who are highly focused on preserving sites associated with African American and LGBTQ history and immigration history. The argument is that for some communities, material culture is really the only record we have of the experience of certain communities. So in the Beyond Integrity movement, they argue that it's not just that an architecturally significant building has to be preserved. Maybe it's a very banal building, but it was the site of an important event, and maybe it would never qualify to be locally listed or listed on the National Register, but we have to find a way to protect it. So for example, you know, there was the site of the first Black-owned bank in Seattle, and its depositors were Southern African Americans who had left the Mississippi Delta and come up to live in Seattle. And so they successfully, you know, saved that building and landmarked it. One was the oldest gay bar in New York. This movement of Beyond Integrity also is these kids. I love these young kids. They're really confronting the National Park Service in the way the Park Service describes certain sites. So in the lower left, you know, here's a sign that says, elk and buffalo used to roam the fields. But the Beyond Integrity people were saying, yes, but the ranch that used to be on the site was a ranch run by these 5 sisters. And it was an example of, you know, women as entrepreneurs in this industry that had been male dominated. And why don't you mention the women along with the elk in the distance?
Interesting.
The William and Letitia Still House in the top left where the word integrity is. It was a stop on the Underground Railroad associated with Harriet Tubman, and Philadelphia did not want to put it on the register because they felt like the building didn't have enough integrity with its materials. But Philly has a citizen nomination process. It's like getting a question on the ballot. You just go around town and you say, how about that building? How about that building? So now it's protected. I was shocked that Philadelphia only protects 2.3% of all its historic buildings. It has demoed 8,000 historic buildings in the past 10 years. And I went into this conference thinking that New England cities had all these protections because we have all these resources. No, 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 we don't have any compared to people in other parts of the country who have relatively few resources, which I think they appreciate much more. On the next slide, there were a lot of sessions on enforcement and code violations and public outreach and permitting processes. So I discovered that enforcement issues during COVID are off the charts because contractors are being more brazen, and there are many unpermitted home improvement projects being sometimes poorly undertaken by people who don't know what they're doing and don't know that they need permission to do it. Some communities do a lot of public outreach to make sure that homeowners know, hey, there are these incentives for you, again, with the tax incentives for maintaining your historic property. In some communities, property taxes are really low, so it's apparently hard to get people to buy into the idea of maintaining historic properties in exchange for tax abatement. A lot of times, a lot of communities have this. Look at this 311, I think, in Denver. It's like, you know, 911, but about illegal demolition or illegal work, so that citizens, again, they have 56 historic districts. Citizens can go, hey, I just saw some illegal window replacement. You know what I mean? I mean, we have our own version of that, but I feel like it's more email and social media and letters to the Daily News. Denver and Aspen people were both talking about how much trouble they're having monitoring ongoing projects because they don't have the staff to do site visits. And some contractors have figured out that they can put up these noise reduction barriers. Like, I'm going to protect the community, but then you can't see what's going on. And then the screen comes down and it's kind of too late, you know, and the illegal work has been done. It's like, oops. Some of the folks on the commissions said that when there are innocent mistakes by homeowners or contractors, of course, all you want to do is get it corrected. Some communities like New Orleans have grants for homeowners who can't really afford to do the remedial work. And then some cities have fines that are very, very high. So, for example, $999 a day for non-compliance. And when the fine amount passes the value of the house, then the city takes the house. A lot of property liens, a lot of lawsuits. People talked about what happens when a building is demoed, not as an innocent mistake, but because someone is really just flouting all law and accountability. And so some communities are saying, hey, guess what? You have to reconstruct the house back to its original specs. Same size, matching materials, right? And then there's a 5-year moratorium on you getting a permit to do any other work, or, you know, contractors can't work in that town anymore. In the middle bottom, this was a recently painted non-permitted mural. And so the city, I think this is Denver again, they have a mayoral graffiti fellow whose goal it is to distinguish public art from vandalism. And his job was to determine whether this is now an aspect of this building that should also be preserved, or whether it's defacing private property and damaging an historic resource, because again, removing the paint would damage the brick. I found out one of the things that is the most trendy right now in new construction and the most hated are metal roofs. And they're often swapped out when they weren't part of the plan. Nobody thinks they're historically appropriate. I didn't talk to anyone on these Zoom calls who thought they were aesthetically pleasing. I've seen some of them around town. The next slide is Aspen, Colorado has an historic preservation contractor licensing program. You may not work on any historic property without passing an exam. You can see that one of the required readings is about historic window restoration. And when an historic property is threatened in Aspen, you know, those folks, they're very well funded. And they get on the phone with the National Trust and the National Alliance. They have a very small inventory of historic properties from, you know, the 19th century gold rush, and everything is new construction. And the developers there they don't talk about preservation values, they talk about like development values. So some communities like this one require contractors to go through special training. Others require contractors to attend all pre-construction hearings, sign off on all documents, and then be overseen by a project monitor from the planning office. Again, these are either very big cities or extremely wealthy communities that have full-time staff to do all this stuff. The next slide shows that some cities have realtor training programs. Of course, another example of wood windows coming up. So in Nashville and in San Antonio, buyers receive and sign off on preservation codes at the closing when they buy the house. So the seller has to say, I'm disclosing to you that this house is in an historic district. And the idea is that if you're a realtor who's trained and certified in selling historic properties, that, you know, make a lot of money. I don't know. I asked a question about enforcing compliance on preservation restriction properties, because last meeting we were talking about, you know, a deck or something. And everyone was shocked because they said, well, of course, if you're trading a preservation restriction against a developer's ability to build a second house on a lot, that second house, of course, goes through your commission, right? Because the style of that house might impact the original preservation restriction protected historic property, I was like, oh, damn. Oh, damn. Yeah. What a great point, everyone. So, yeah. And then the next slide, there was a lot of discussion of the flexibility in different state building codes for historic structures. Again, gotta take a PowerPoint preparation course one of these days. And then the next one, a lot of discussion about Standard 9 again. It says it has to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. And some communities, environmental sustainability is a big focus of local government, have expanded the definition of the word environment, which traditionally means other buildings and landscapes, to include sustainability criteria. So in the next slide, there were many presentations on climate change in conservation districts, sustainability. Conservation districts are sort of like historic districts, but a light version. And communities that aren't quite ready for historic districts because people are scared. What does it mean for me as a property owner? But many people are sympathetic to environmental sustainability issues. So they understand that preservation reduces, material waste and carbon emissions. When fossil fuels became available, before fossil fuels were available, buildings were designed for natural heat, natural lighting, and so older buildings are more energy efficient. And, people used to pay attention. Where's the sun coming from? Where's the wind coming from? And so there's a lot more of an appetite for talking about preservation in environmental terms in some communities. So in a few towns in Colorado, demolition requires a permit from the Department of Public Health and Environment because of hazardous waste concerns, especially lead and asbestos, and people don't want it in the groundwater.
Yeah, sort of makes sense.
Yeah. The next one, well, and that's there twice because I liked it. And then the one after that is, I didn't realize how few structures are protected nationally. And in most of the country, mid-century modern is historic. Like, I couldn't believe the images people showed me of things they fought so hard to preserve when I was like, oh, wow, that's, a 1950 ranch house, but in San Antonio, right, that's all the new construction. People had never heard of a salt box house from 1657. Never heard of that. Pre-war to them, pre-World War II, pre-war to that house, French and Indian War, whole different world.
Yeah.
There was a lot of consensus on the importance of protecting outbuildings, which I know we need to include in our inventory because they're so often subject to demolition by neglect, but we're such important parts of the historic landscape. The next slide, and there's only a few more. In 2017, the secretary changed the review age from 75 to 50. Our permitting language should be updated to reflect that. I know Stephanie from the Preservation Trust has made that point at many of our public meetings. And somebody made the comment that in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we all learned about in sociology, at the very top is preservation, in communities. And the next
self-preservation.
Yes. And the next one, the last slide is the 10 commandments of rehabilitation. I ended up not agreeing that the Secretary's standards are like the 10 commandments, or at least not the way a fundamental Southern Baptist minister would think of the 10 commandments. I thought of them more as the Bill of Rights, or maybe our guidelines are like the British Constitution, which is not in a single document, but it's a set of documents and traditions, and the Secretary's standards are one of them. I joined this organization. They have some great publications, and I will find out that the conference was supposed to be in Tacoma, Washington this year. It was virtual, and I'm going to find out where it is next year. I just learned so much and totally nerded out when people were like, let's talk about standard 4 for 2 hours. And I'm like, yes, let's do that. It's amazing. Couldn't walk away, downloaded the recordings, watched them a few times, took notes. So I wanted to share some of those things with you and just my enthusiasm for this organization. And it was nice to see people from other commissions all over the country struggling with what the heck some of these things should mean in our community. So thank you for putting up with my awful slides.
I love your enthusiasm, Patricia.
I had a great time sitting there at the Zoom thing and watching all these pictures and talking.
Yeah, and it is kind of sheds an interesting perspective to see how, you know, what's going on with preservation from completely different parts of the country that, you know, we don't usually think about.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you for that.
Yes.
Well, the hour draws a bit late. We do have to approve the minutes from the 13th of August, our last meeting. I know I took a look at them. They looked okay to me. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes, or did anyone see an issue with them?
This is Joe. I move that we approve the minutes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So, Mr. Morgan, your vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Fay, your vote?
Yes.
Mr. Maxime?
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
We don't have Ron. No, I'm not sure if we have Mr. Carmworth either. I'm a yes on that. So at least we have enough votes to approve that. Where are we as far as, let's see, now by my attendee list, I see Andy has joined us. Christopher is in there twice for some reason, and no Malcolm. All right. If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn for tonight?
I move we adjourn for the evening.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it sounded like Peter and Chris there. So Chris, as the last one spoke, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, and Peter?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
And Mr. Fay?
Yes.
And the chair is a yes on that as well. Well, thank you all then. Then we are officially adjourned. Caitlin, thank you for running those the slides and the presentations. That went well. So Andy.
And Patricia, I'd like to thank Patricia for a really great slideshow. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it. All right.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you.
I look forward to learning more.
Good. Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too, Patricia. So
Okay.
thank you very much for taking the initiative to to go to the thing, attend the thing, and all that Zooming, and then put together a little some key things that you found interesting from it.
And for your passion.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, very good.
You're fine. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I'll let you go, and and we are adjourned for this go round. So thank you all.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Glenn.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.